Well, hello, First Baptist Church, Forest Park Church family. It's been a little while since we've done one of these updates, and so I wanted to kind of update everybody what's going on as things have continued to change around coronavirus and in our area and local schools and all that. Just wanted to pump out some information, and I apologize. It's been a little while, but hopefully I can explain why that was here in just a minute. Listen, we told you several weeks ago that we were going to be very open about this process of reopening. Not just for transparency of information, that's fine, but also as a church family, we're learning how to seek God, how to take the words and the stories in the Bible and translate those into our own life and hear from God, understand what God's doing, and work on our prayer journals. I'm looking at my prayer journal here that I've been keeping up with and encouraging you guys to do the same. So we have been continuing to do that as a church family, and obviously the question on everybody's mind is, when do we reopen? How do we navigate? What do the coming days look like? And those are questions we just don't have answers to. We have not had answers to, and so we're forced into a position to trust God, and I think that's probably healthy for all of us. So full transparency, we thought that we were going to open soon. We had a target date in mind, and as we were going through June, moving into the summer, we were sort of looking at that Sunday, August 2nd, as a reopening date. When schools a few weeks ago began to announce delays in their start, we've been using schools as a beacon and sort of a navigational tool for us. So we delayed our start as they began to roll out those announcements. And so I was pretty transparent on Sunday morning a few weeks ago that was a little bit disappointing for me. It was a little bit discouraging as we delayed that start again. We were looking into the middle of September at that point. But that was still in the not so distant future. We were looking forward to it. And all of our attention has been focused on reopening the church. That whole conversation, if you go through my prayer journal, if you go through my prayer list, you're going to see at the very top of that what's on my mind section, it'll always say reopening the church and what is our timeline. So that's just been at the top of my prayer list, really honestly, since we closed down. Well, this last week, these last few days, that situation has changed again. The two counties that really help us navigate and have the most impact on our church family are Clayton and Henry counties. Well, in the last couple of days, in the last week, both Clayton and Henry County have done a couple of things. They have delayed their start by 2 weeks, and they have decided to start school online only. They initially were going to offer some options where you could be in school or online. They have eliminated the option of being in the schools, and they've decided to start online only. Henry County did not put a timeline on their online studies for their online or at-home studies. Clayton County announced that at least the first 9 weeks of school would be online only. They would not be in the building. So that puts the return to school for Clayton County at the earliest in the middle of October. Well, we were going to intentionally sort of lag behind the school system and just use that as a barometer to see how things played out and what was happening and what was safe and what was not. Again, I've just always said I'm not willing for our church to be the front line of the social experiment. So we were going to let others figure that out and navigate sort of based on that data. So if they go back middle of October, that puts us returning at the very earliest in November sometime. And at that point, look, we're moving into the height of flu season and all that, and the winter months and everything that goes with that as far as the flu virus, which corona is essentially a flu virus. So we're tracking those things. All that to say, I don't have a clue when we're going to be able to reopen the church. And we've been chasing that reopen date. We've been thinking that's a logical first step as we move into the 3-phase process that we've been talking through, which was reopen, rebuild, and then relaunch. And so reopen was step one. Well, as of this week, as of Monday morning, I and some others on the leadership team, we have decided that we are no longer going to chase a reopen date. As we've been studying through Exodus and much of my own personal Bible study, God seems to be making it clear that He is the one that sets the timeline. He is the one that sets the agenda. And our responsibility is to sit back and wait on Him, wait on His word, wait on His action, wait on His movement. And so we're sort of changing our mindset a little bit. Instead of chasing an arbitrary reopen date, we're going to choose to lay back and wait on God's movement. Now, what does that look like? Well, we think that's actually going to happen really naturally. So the date to close the church back ultimately became March 15th. That was not something that we pursued. That was not something that was on our mind. That was something that came very naturally through the course of how this stuff has developed. And so we feel like that reopening will do the same thing. We'll feel much the same way. When it's time to reopen, it will be obvious, and we'll be able to do it pretty quickly without having to jump through a bunch of hoops and a bunch of protocols and all those things. So we're just going to choose to put that conversation of reopening the church on the shelf and look ahead and look now at what God is doing in the moment. And we just feel like that's going to come to us really naturally. Now, I know that some of you are feeling a lot like I've been feeling the last couple of days, and that this feels like a major setback. This feels a little deflating. Well, in reality, I'm gonna challenge you to think through and put a little pressure, push back on that initial gut reaction that this feels like a defeat. And I'll give you a few reasons why. I have been in regular communication with many church pastors, both in our area and other areas across the country. Just friends of mine, guys that I trust. Some of those, man, have almost been daily conversations. And I'm glad I don't have to do this alone. And one of the great benefits that's come out of this crisis is churches working together and pastors working together and all sharing ideas and being very open with one another and very vulnerable with one another. And so through those conversations, I've noticed a few patterns. Some of those pastors that I'm in communication with have already reopened their church, and some have not. And so we've said from the beginning, we're all in the same storm, but we're all driving, we're all captaining, we're all piloting different boats. And so if you're in a big boat, you respond to the storm different than you do if you're in a small boat. And so while many of us have made different decisions, the hearts behind those decisions have been to follow God and trust God. But here's a couple of things, a couple of patterns that have revealed themselves from many of these pastors that have chosen to reopen. What happens is they go through all these meetings and get all these logistics and protocols and safety guidelines in place, and church becomes something very different than it was when we left back in March. It's this awkward, interaction. Everybody's a little bit standoffish, a little bit intimidated maybe. Had a very good friend of mine down in Eufaula, Alabama, a pastor friend of mine. He's much smarter than I'll ever be. He described his first Sunday back as an awkward first date, that nobody really knew how to interact, nobody really knew how to behave. But there's some enthusiasm with coming back and returning. So people have been plowing through that, pushing through that initial awkward interaction, and sort of making it happen. So for the first week, 2, 3 weeks, maybe a month, attendance is fairly strong. They've been running, around 30 to 40% of attendance as these churches have reopened for the first few weeks. But then over time, that attendance begins to taper off and has continued to dwindle, largely because people are realizing that they're not getting a significantly better experience live in church than they are at home online. And so people have just sort of tended to move away and keep the convenience of being at home online, particularly families with children. That has been the missing group from these churches because we're just not able to safely offer childcare, nursery, children's church, Sunday school, those kind of things. So the missing group from all of these churches has been families with children because they're just choosing to stay home and not bring their children into the sanctuary to be on display in front of everybody else. And I, like many, totally understand that with an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. I know what kind of chaos is in my living room on Sunday morning, and I don't want to bring that chaos in front of you into the sanctuary on Sunday morning if we come back. So the logistics are hard. The attendance spikes initially with some excitement, but begins to taper off. And many of the pastors that I have talked to over the last several weeks have ultimately regretted reopening. And there's two primary reasons why they regret their decision to reopen. One is even though they put in all these safety protocols and all these logistics and all this strategy, people are people and nobody follows the rules. And so inevitably we end up congregated together. We end up, hanging out in various places on the parking lot or whatever. It's just people are people. We're designed to be together. We want to be together, and they don't follow the rules. And so these pastors feel like they are sitting on a ticking time bomb. And it seems like about every 3 days or so, we get a headline in the newspaper of some new outbreak that can be traced back to a given congregation or a choir rehearsal or some activity that happens inside of church. And the fact remains that churches, restaurants, concert venues, those kind of environments just are more dangerous than most of the other encounters that we have. What the data is showing is that when we have prolonged exposure to one another in groups of more than about 15 minutes, particularly when you're on a shared HVAC system, a shared air conditioning system, that is the danger zone. That as we talk, as we speak, as we breathe, all that stuff gets kicked up in the air, moves around the air, and that's where the danger of infection comes from. So churches are different. We're not being persecuted. We are free to meet. We are free to share the gospel. So this is not a persecution issue at all. It really boils down to a safety issue. And the reality is prolonged large group exposure in an enclosed environment like a church sanctuary just remains dangerous at this point in time. So these pastors that have chosen to open, they always feel like they're walking on eggshells, sitting on a ticking time bomb, just waiting for the next outbreak to happen. And those in our area that have happened, they'll tell you that it happens quickly. And once it breaks out, man, it creates a whole nother list of headaches and those things. So we've just chosen to lay back and not be on the forefront of that situation. So they've regretted opening because it's a ticking time bomb. But this second regret, this second reason why they regret, I think is actually more poignant and more to the point of where we're trying to be. As I've communicated with them, I've asked them one very simple question. Are you more effective as a church now that you have reopened than you were when you were closed? And almost unanimously, almost across the board, the answer has been no. That they are not more effective now that they've reopened than they were when they were closed. And many of these guys have actually admitted to me that reopening has become a distraction to the other ministry going on in and through the church. Because as they get together for staff meetings and leadership meetings, the bulk of the discussion becomes around safety and logistics and those things, and not about the ministry of the church, the mission of the church, which is to love God, love people, and make disciples. So because of that, because of what I've experienced through walking through this with other churches and just doing some research, I actually don't think that our decision to delay reopening even further is a major setback. I think, in fact, it's probably given us some clarity. So, starting Monday morning, I had a little vacation last week, a little family trip last week, And so I was back in the office Monday morning. We now have a blank slate in front of us. And the question is, how are we going to be effective as a church, as a body of believers, right now in this situation when we don't have the ability to gather together in our building? Well, that creates all kind of exciting opportunities and all kinds of exciting things to think through. And so I don't have all the answers to that, but I just wanted to share with you a little bit of what we're thinking now and sort of the vision that we want to look forward to and some of the things that we're thinking through. So how can we be effective as a church in this current situation? Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, your personal Bible study. We said a couple of weeks ago that I think that there is a revival coming. I think God is getting ready to make some big moves. But revival always starts inside the church, inside the hearts and minds of believers. And so now more than ever before, it is so vitally important for you to dig in and stay connected and stay committed to your personal Bible study. We also, several weeks ago, 14, 15 weeks ago, started doing our prayer journals. That template is up on our website, and some of you have participated in that. Some of you have not. Some of you started and stopped, and we've openly said that sometimes this is difficult. But I'm challenging you again to just stay committed to your personal prayer time. If it helps you, I will share with you one modification that I've made to the prayer journal that's online. And that is, we originally launched it and said this was an outline that you could use every single day. Those 4 questions, those 4 sections. What's on my mind? What is my daily scripture reading? What am I praying about? And then the time to listen to God. All of that's on our website. You can go check it out. I have made one modification in that in my own personal life. And that is, I'm using each one of those 4 sections each week instead of each day. I found in my life that what was on my mind and the burdens that I was carrying and the prayers that I was offering up were not significantly different day to day. So I've just laid out those 4 sections on a larger format over a couple of pages of my prayer journal, so that I can just sort of stay in tune throughout the week and keep going back to it. I found that to be very effective, and I'm able to see God's activity and God's words to me over the week, and it just lays out in front of me. So there's something that I've modified that made it easier for me. You're welcome to modify it however you'd like to, but that just gives you a place to start. So personal Bible study, personal prayer, we've been pushing that now for the last 3 months or so. We recognize that we also have a deep desire for connection with one another. And we got the surveys back, and we hear from you all the time. We're just missing each other. We're missing that fellowship. We're missing our church family. And so we were sort of looking forward to a reopen date, and that would be the foundation for launching some of those things. Well, we're not going to reopen, but that desire for connection remains. So we're going to start working on a couple of things. One, we want regular family events. The Mother's Day, drive-through Mother's Day gifting was a huge success. The Father's Day cookout was a huge success. So we've decided that we want to try to do one family event a month like that. Probably outside in the parking lot, something simple, but just an excuse to get together and see everybody. So mark your calendars right now for August the 15th, Saturday, August the 15th. We're just going to get together. We don't need an excuse. We don't need a reason. We were going to call it a back-to-school gathering or whatever, but who knows what's happening with schools. It doesn't matter. Label it what you want. We just want to see you. We want to gather. We're going to do, maybe some ice cream or something out in the parking lot. But Saturday, August 15th will be our gathering as a church family for the month of August. So that's definitely on the calendar. We want to see you there. And then here's some things long-term that we're working on. You've heard us asking for volunteers to help out Glenn Minks building a set for our studio. We are building a small production studio that could do some simple videos, some radio-style format content for YouTube that could go out to our church family. my number one priority once we get that thing built and up and running is I want to interview you. I want to come in and set up a interview time where we hear your life story and understand your testimony and how God has been moving and working in your life. So as we have that desire for connection, one thing we've noticed in churches across the country is the church gathers on Sunday and we wave at each other and we kind of know each other, but we don't really know a lot about each other. So we want to start to solve that. We want to set up testimony times, and each week our goal is to pump out a testimony or a life story of some of our church members. So once we get that studio built, it's not ready yet, but you're going to be hearing me asking you to come up during the week one evening, and we're going to be videoing those things and getting those out. And we feel like that's going to lay a strong foundation for intimacy within our church family, really genuinely getting to know each other. So we've been saying the last couple of weeks, we overcome the world by the blood of the Lamb and the words of our testimony. And so we're going to really be leaning in hard on that idea of testimony. And we're going to be asking you guys to come and share your story. I know it's intimidating, but we're going to get through it. And once we start, you're going to find the benefits will be great. And we're going to have a lot of fun doing that. The next thing that we're working on, and I do not have all the details here. I don't have all the answers. But again, we're just being transparent. We are trying to reboot Sunday school. So Sunday school teachers out there, you're going to be hearing from me in the next couple of weeks or so. We're going to be organizing how we can gather in small groups, whether that's online or those of you who are comfortable in your homes, or if we need to open the church for some small groups during the week or whatever. We're going to be working through that. But we are going to be working hard over the next couple of weeks on how we can reinstitute some form of Sunday school or small groups and get those groups gathering back together in small formats where we feel like it's safer and we can keep social distance and those things. And so that's become a number one priority for us. Out of that, we are looking to identify some leaders. We're looking to identify some people who want to go deeper and want to pursue what the Bible calls discipleship. So we're called to love God, love people, and make disciples. We feel like right now the weakest of those three callings is discipleship. So we're meeting, got some meetings set up with some key leaders and some folks that have more experience in that than I do. And we're going to be developing a discipleship program. And the intent behind that is that we will invest in you, those of you who are interested in going deeper and really truly being discipled. But the expectation is that you will turn around and invest in others. And so we'll be laying that out here in the coming months as we get these things up and running. But we're going to really start focusing on personal, one-on-one, small group, small format discipleship. And so that will come out of our Sunday school gatherings, our small group Sunday school gatherings. We'll be looking to identify those of you who are willing to make a deeper investment, not just in yourself, but in others. And look, after that, we're just continuing to trust God for every step. As we've been studying Exodus, we see these incredible movements of God, and the people have largely been passive spectators in that, following through with each step of obedience that God has given them. And that's where we are as a church, is we don't know what's happening in the future. We don't know what's coming. We're just trying to be obedient to the next step. God has blessed us so far. God has protected us. God is moving and working in incredible ways in our church family and has been for the last 4 or 5 months. And man, I just expect that to continue, if not get stronger and better over the next several months, even though we're not able to meet together. So the Bible says that God's word is a lamp unto our feet. And if you've ever walked in the dark on a trail holding a lamp, you recognize the lamp doesn't show you a whole lot of information. It shows you the next step or two. And so those are our next few steps. That's what God has revealed to us to this point. So with this video going out, right now, you know everything that I know. But I know that we are trusting God and we remain faithful to Him. and you guys remain faithful to us and our church. So church family, I love you. We're all in this together. We're all figuring it out. And I just really appreciate your trust in me, your trust in the leadership of this church, and we don't take that lightly. And so we're pursuing God with everything that we have, but we're expecting you to do the same. So let's do this together. Let's pursue God. Let's seek God as a church family. And the future for our church is exciting and bright. Guys, I love you. Call to the church anytime. Come up here. Come see me. Come hang out. Text, call, whatever. We're here for you, and we miss you. We want to see you. So thank you for your time.